Not again, I muttered, staring at the pink sticky note on Martin's desk. The flowery handwriting was unmistakable. Carolyn. I crumpled the paper in my fist, my jaw clenching as I fought the urge to scream. This wasn't the first time I'd found one of her little love notes, and I doubted it would be the last. I smoothed out the paper, reading the words that made my stomach churn. Lunch today? I'll bring your favorite. So. I heard the front door open, and Martin's voice called out, Elaine, I'm home early. Quickly, I shoved the note into my pocket. In your office, dear, I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. Martin appeared in the doorway, his smile fading as he saw my face. What's wrong? I forced a smile. Nothing. Just tidying up a bit. He crossed the room, wrapping his arms around me. You're a terrible liar, Elaine. What's really going on? I pulled away, unable to meet his eyes. It's nothing, really. I found another note from Carolyn. Martin sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Elaine, we've been over this. She's just being friendly. Friendly? I scoffed, pulling the crumpled note from my pocket. This doesn't look like friendly to me, Martin. He took the note, his brow furrowing as he read it. Okay, I admit it's a bit much, but you know there's nothing going on between us, do I? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Martin's eyes widened. Elaine, how can you even think that? After everything we've been through. I sank into his desk chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 47 years. I don't know what to think anymore, Martin. She's beautiful, successful, everything I'm not. Stop it, Martin said firmly, kneeling in front of me. You are everything to me, Elaine. You always have been, since that first day in high school when you tutored me in algebra. I couldn't help but smile at the memory. You were hopeless with quadratic equations. And you were patient, he said, taking my hands in his, just like you've been patient with me all these years. The phone on Martin's desk rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. It's work, he said apologetically. I have to take this. I nodded, watching as he answered the call. His face grew serious as he listened, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. Yes, I understand, he said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and turned to me. I'm sorry, honey. There's an emergency at the office. I have to go in. On a Saturday? I asked, my voice tight. Martin nodded, already reaching for his jacket. I know, I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you, I promise. As he hurried out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Gloria? I said when Martin's mother answered. It's Elaine. I need your advice. Of course, dear. Gloria's warm voice came through the line. What's troubling you? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It's about Martin and a woman at his office named Carolyn. As I poured out my fears to Gloria, I couldn't help but wonder. Was I fighting to save my marriage, or was I already too late? I hung up the phone with Gloria, her words of reassurance ringing hollow in my ears. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I needed to do something, anything, to keep my mind off Martin and Carolyn. Grabbing my purse, I headed out the door. The farmer's market would be a good distraction, I thought. As I wandered through the stalls, the vibrant colors and bustling energy did little to lift my spirits. Elaine? A familiar voice called out. I turned to see Sarah, an old friend from college. I thought that was you. How are you? I forced a smile. Oh, you know, just picking up some fresh produce. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Are you okay? You seem off. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Martin. Running late. Don't wait up. My heart sank. Sarah must have seen the change in my expression because she grabbed my arm. Come on, let's get coffee. You look like you need to talk. 30 minutes later, we were seated in a cozy cafe, steaming mugs in front of us. I found myself pouring out everything. The notes, Carolyn's relentless pursuit, my growing doubts. Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed. Elaine, honey, this isn't right. You need to confront Martin about this. I shook my head. I've tried, Sarah. He just brushes it off, says I'm overreacting. Then you need proof, Sarah said firmly. Something he can't ignore. The idea sent a chill through me. You mean spy on him? Sarah shrugged. Call it what you want, but you deserve the truth, Elaine. As I drove home, Sarah's words echoed in my mind. The house was dark when I arrived, Martin still not home. I hesitated for a moment before heading to his office. My hands shook as I booted up his computer. This felt wrong, invasive, but I needed to know. His email opened easily. He'd never bothered to change his password from our anniversary date. I scrolled through, my heart racing. Nothing suspicious in his inbox. I was about to log off when I noticed a folder labeled Personal. Inside were dozens of emails from Carolyn. My stomach churned as I opened the most recent one. Martin, I can't stop thinking about our lunch yesterday, the way you looked at me. I know you feel it too. Why are we fighting this? See? The room spun. I gripped the desk, trying to steady myself. This couldn't be happening. The sound of a key in the lock made me jump. I quickly closed the email, shutting down the computer just as Martin's footsteps approached. Elaine? He called out. Are you still up? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. In your office, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. Martin appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, looking tired. What are you doing in here so late? I stood facing him. I think we need to talk, Martin. His expression changed, a flicker of, was it guilt? About what? About Carolyn, I said, my voice growing stronger. About the emails, the lunches, the looks, about why you're really working so late. Martin's face paled. Elaine, I can explain. Can you? I interrupted, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me. For how long, Martin? He stepped towards me, reaching out. It's not what you think. Please, let me. The shrill ring of his phone cut through the tension. Martin glanced at it, then back at me, indecision clear on his face. Go ahead, I said coldly. Answer it. I'm sure it's important. As Martin fumbled with his phone, I brushed past him, heading for the door. I needed air, space to think. Elaine, wait, Martin called after me. But I was already gone, stepping out into the cool night air, my world crumbling around me. I spent the night at Gloria's, tossing and turning on her floral-patterned guest bed. By morning, my anger had cooled to a dull ache. I needed answers, and I wasn't leaving until I got them. You're doing the right thing, dear, Gloria said, squeezing my hand as I prepared to leave. Remember, you're stronger than you think. I nodded, grateful for her support. The drive home felt endless, my mind racing with all the things I wanted to say to Martin. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street. My heart sank. I knew that sleek red convertible. It was Carolyn's. I stormed into the house, ready for a fight. Martin, I called out, my voice echoing through the rooms. I found them in the kitchen. Martin leaning against the counter, Carolyn perched on a bar stool. They both looked up, startled by my entrance. Elaine, Martin said, his voice strained. You're home. Carolyn stood, smoothing her designer skirt. I should go, she murmured. No, I said firmly, blocking the doorway. You stay right where you are. We're going to settle this once and for all. Martin stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. Elaine, please, this isn't what it looks like. I laughed bitterly. Really? Because it looks like my husband is having a cozy breakfast with the woman who's been trying to steal him away. Carolyn's face flushed. That's not fair. Martin and I are just what? I interrupted. Friends? Colleagues? Is that why you're sending him love notes and intimate emails? Martin's eyes widened. You read my emails? I had to know the truth, I shot back, and clearly I was right to be suspicious. Carolyn stood, her composure cracking. You don't understand. Martin and I have a connection. Enough, Martin's voice boomed, silencing us both. He turned to Carolyn, his expression hard. This has gone too far. I've told you before, I'm not interested. My heart belongs to Elaine, it always has. I felt a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by doubt. Then why the secret meetings, the late nights at work? Martin sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been trying to let her down gently. I didn't want to hurt anyone or cause problems at work, but I see now that was a mistake. He crossed the room, taking my hands in his. Elaine, I love you. Only you. I'm so sorry I ever made you doubt that. I wanted to believe him, but the pain of the past few weeks held me back. How can I trust you? Because I'm done hiding, Martin said firmly. He turned to Carolyn. You need to leave, now, and on Monday I'm going to HR to report your behavior. Carolyn's face crumpled. Martin, please. Go, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. As Carolyn gathered her things and fled, I felt the tension in the room shift. Martin pulled me close, his familiar scent washing over me. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Can you ever forgive me? I pulled back, meeting his gaze. I want to, I said honestly, but it's going to take time. And work. Martin nodded, relief evident in his eyes. I'll do whatever it takes, I promise. As we stood there in our kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the windows, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had weathered storms before, and we could weather this one too. But as I relaxed into Martin's embrace, a nagging thought tugged at the back of my mind. Carolyn had seemed so sure, so convinced of her connection with Martin. What if this wasn't the end? What if she wasn't ready to let go? I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the warmth of Martin's arms around me. We would face whatever came next together. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that our troubles were far from over. The weeks following our confrontation with Carolyn were tense. Martin and I were trying to rebuild trust, but it felt like walking on eggshells. Every late night at the office, every text message sent my mind spinning with doubt. One evening, as we sat in uncomfortable silence over dinner, the doorbell rang. I answered it to find Gloria standing there, a concerned look on her face. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, stepping inside. "I just wanted to check on you two." Martin emerged from the dining room, surprise evident on his face. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Gloria's eyes darted between us. "I've been worried. You've both been so distant lately. What's going on?" I exchanged a glance with Martin, unsure how much to reveal. But before either of us could speak, Gloria continued. "And don't try to tell me it's nothing. I ran into Carolyn at the grocery store yesterday. She seemed off. Kept talking about you, Martin, like you two were." She trailed off, her implication clear. Martin's face paled. "Mom, it's not what you think. Carolyn's been causing problems at work, but I've handled it." "Have you?" I couldn't stop the words from slipping out, because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look handled at all. Gloria's eyes widened. "Oh dear, I think you both better sit down and tell me everything." Over the next hour, we poured out the whole sordid story. Gloria listened intently, her expression growing more troubled with each revelation. "I can't believe this," she said when we finished. "Martin, how could you let it get this far?" Martin hung his head. "I thought I could manage it without hurting anyone. I was wrong." Gloria turned to me, her eyes soft with sympathy. "And you, Elaine? You must be devastated." I nodded, fighting back tears. "I just don't know what to believe anymore." "Well, I'll tell you what I believe," Gloria said firmly. "I believe in the love I've seen between you two for decades, and I believe that if you're both willing to fight for it, you can overcome this." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Martin reached for my hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I let him take it. "I want to fight for us," he said softly. "If you'll let me." Before I could respond, Martin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face darkening. "It's Carolyn," he said. "She's outside, says she needs to talk to me." My heart raced. "Are you going to?" Martin stood, his jaw set. "Yes, but not alone. We're going to face this together." As we approached the front door, I could see Carolyn through the window, pacing on our porch. She looked disheveled, nothing like her usual polished self. Martin opened the door, and Carolyn's eyes lit up. "Martin, I knew you'd come." She stopped short when she saw me and Gloria behind him. "What are they doing here?" she hissed. "This is between us, Martin." "No, it's not," Martin said firmly. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of my wife and mother." Carolyn's face contorted with anger. "You don't mean that. We have something special, Martin. You can't deny it." I felt a surge of anger, stepping forward. "That's enough, Carolyn. You need to leave. Now." She laughed bitterly. "Or what? You can't keep us apart forever, Elaine. Martin will realize." "I said leave," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my voice. Carolyn stumbled back, shock evident on her face. She looked at Martin, pleading. "Tell her, Martin. Tell her how you feel about me." Martin's grip on my hand tightened. "The only thing I feel for you is pity, Carolyn. Please, get help." As Carolyn fled down our driveway, sobbing, I turned to Martin. "This isn't over, is it?" He shook his head grimly. "No, I don't think it is. But whatever comes next, we'll face it together." I nodded, a mix of fear and determination coursing through me. As we closed the door on Carolyn's retreating figure, I knew we had a long road ahead. But for the first time in weeks, I felt ready to fight for our love, no matter what it took. The days following Carolyn's meltdown on our porch were eerily quiet. Too quiet. Martin assured me he hadn't heard from her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the calm before the storm. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry, Martin's phone buzzed on the nightstand. I hesitated, my hand hovering over it. We'd promised transparency, but this felt invasive. The screen lit up again, and my resolve crumbled. My heart stopped as I read the message preview. Carolyn, I miss you. Please, just one more. With shaking hands, I unlocked Martin's phone. The full message made my blood run cold. I miss you. Please, just one more night. What we had was special. I scrolled up, my vision blurring with tears. Dozens of messages, all from Carolyn, all intimate and pleading. Martin's responses were sparse, but they were there. Not now. We can't. This has to stop. But he hadn't blocked her, hadn't reported her to HR like he'd promised. I sank onto the bed, clutching the phone. How could I have been so naive? The front door opened, and I heard Martin call out, "Elaine, I'm home early." I wiped my eyes, steeling myself. Upstairs, I managed to croak out. Martin appeared in the doorway, his smile fading as he took in my tear-stained face and his phone in my hand. "Elaine, what's wrong?" I held up the phone, my voice surprisingly steady. "Care to explain these?" He paled, reaching for the device. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't you dare tell me what I think. I trusted you, Martin. I believed you when you said it was over." Martin sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "It is over. I swear, Elaine. I've been trying to get her to stop." "By saying not now?" I spat. "That's not a no, Martin. That's a maybe later." He buried his face in his hands. "I know. I messed up. I thought if I let her down gently, she'd eventually give up." "And did she?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Martin shook his head. "No. If anything, she's gotten worse. She shows up at my office, calls me constantly. I didn't want to worry you, but..." "But what?" I pressed. He looked up, his eyes haunted. "She threatened to hurt herself if I cut her off completely. I didn't know what to do." My anger deflated slightly, replaced by a mix of pity and frustration. "Oh, Martin, why didn't you tell me?" "I thought I could handle it," he said softly. "I didn't want to burden you with my mistakes." I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "We're supposed to be partners, Martin. That means sharing burdens, even the ugly ones." He nodded, reaching for my hand. I let him take it, despite the hurt still churning inside me. "What do we do now?" I asked. Before Martin could answer, his phone buzzed again in my lap. We both looked down to see another message from Carolyn. "I'm outside. We need to talk." My heart raced as I moved to the window. Sure enough, Carolyn's red convertible was parked across the street. "She's here," I whispered. Martin stood, his face set with determination. "Enough is enough. I'm going to end this, once and for all." As he moved towards the door, I caught his arm. "Wait. We do this together." He hesitated, then nodded. "Together." We descended the stairs, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. But as Martin reached for the front door, I couldn't shake the feeling that opening it would change our lives forever. I squeezed Martin's hand. "Whatever happens, promise me one thing." He turned to me, his eyes questioning. "Promise me there will be no more secrets between us," I said firmly. Martin nodded solemnly. "I promise." With that, he opened the door and we stepped out to confront Carolyn and the uncertain future that awaited us. The moment we stepped onto the porch, I knew something was terribly wrong. Carolyn wasn't alone. 3 other women stood with her, all clearly intoxicated and radiating hostility. Well, Carolyn slurred, swaying slightly. "If it isn't the happy couple." Martin tensed beside me. "Carolyn, you need to leave, all of you." One of Carolyn's friends, a tall blonde, sneered. "Oh, we're not going anywhere, not until you admit the truth, Martin." My heart raced. "What truth?" Carolyn stumbled forward, her eyes locked on Martin. "Tell her, darling. Tell your wife about us." I gripped Martin's hand tighter, willing him to deny it. But his silence spoke volumes. "Martin," I whispered, my voice breaking. He turned to me, anguish etched across his face. "Elaine, don't you dare lie to her!" Carolyn shrieked, lurching towards us. "We were in love. Tell her." Martin stepped in front of me protectively. "That's enough, Carolyn. You're drunk and delusional." The blonde friend laughed bitterly. "Delusional? We've all seen the texts, the emails. You led her on for months." My world tilted on its axis. "Months? I thought this was recent, but..." "Is that true?" I asked Martin, my voice barely audible. Before he could answer, Carolyn lunged at me, her nails raking across my cheek. "He's mine!" she screamed. Chaos erupted. Martin wrestled Carolyn away while her friends shouted and pushed. I stumbled back, my hand pressed to my stinging face, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare. Suddenly, Gloria's voice cut through the mayhem. "What in God's name is going on here?" We all turned to see Martin's mother striding up the walkway, her face a mask of fury. "Mom," Martin started, still restraining a sobbing Carolyn. "I can explain." Gloria held up a hand, silencing him. She surveyed the scene, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Carolyn. "You," she said, her voice ice cold. "I warned you to stay away from my family." Carolyn hiccuped, mascara streaking down her face. "You don't understand. Martin and I understand perfectly," Gloria interrupted. "You're a sad, desperate woman who can't accept reality. Now, you and your friends are going to leave before I call the police." Something in Gloria's tone must have sobered the group. They retreated, half dragging Carolyn to their car. As they drove away, Gloria turned to us. "Inside. Both of you. Now." We followed her meekly, the tension palpable. Once in the living room, Gloria rounded on Martin. "Explain yourself, young man, and don't you dare leave anything out." For the next hour, Martin confessed everything. The flirtations that went too far, the emotional affair that never quite became physical, his misguided attempts to let Carolyn down gently. With each word, I felt my heart breaking anew. When he finished, Gloria shook her head, disappointment radiating from her. "I raised you better than this, Martin." She turned to me, her eyes softening. "Elaine, dear, I am so sorry. You deserve better than this mess." I nodded numbly, unable to form words. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the public humiliation, crashed over me. "I think," I said slowly, rising from the couch, "I need some time alone." Martin reached for me. "Elaine, please," I jerked away. "Don't. Just don't." As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I heard Gloria's muffled voice. "You've made your bed, Martin. Now you have to lie in it." I closed the door behind me, sinking to the floor as sobs racked my body. How had we come to this? Could our marriage survive such a betrayal? As the sun set outside our window, casting long shadows across the room, I faced the hardest decision of my life. Stay and fight for our love, or walk away and save what was left of my dignity. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone. I needed advice, support, anything to help me navigate this nightmare. As I scrolled through my contacts, one name stood out, Sarah, my old college friend. The one who had urged me to confront Martin in the first place. I hit dial, praying she would answer. On the third ring, her voice came through. "Elaine? What's wrong?" Taking a deep breath, I prepared to tell her everything. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days following Carolyn's drunken confrontation blurred together in a haze of tears and tense conversations. Martin slept on the couch, giving me space I wasn't sure I wanted. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Carolyn's face, twisted with rage and desperation. A week after the incident, I woke to the sound of breaking glass. Heart pounding, I crept downstairs to find Martin sweeping up shards from a shattered picture frame. Our wedding photo lay among the debris. "What happened?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. Martin looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Carolyn, she threw a rock through the window." I felt the blood drain from my face. "She was here? When?" "Just now," he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I chased her off, but, Elaine, this can't go on." I nodded, suddenly feeling very small. "What do we do?" Martin straightened, determination etched across his face. "I'm quitting my job, today." The words hit me like a physical blow. "But your career, you've worked so hard." "None of that matters if I lose you," he interrupted, taking my hands in his. "I'll find another job. What I can't replace is us." Tears welled in my eyes. Part of me wanted to pull away, to protect myself from more pain, but a larger part recognized the sacrifice he was making. "Are you sure?" I whispered. He nodded, pulling me close. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." As we stood there, surrounded by the broken remnants of our past, I felt a glimmer of hope for our future. That afternoon, I accompanied Martin to his office. The tension in the elevator was palpable as we ascended to his floor. When the doors opened, we were met with chaos. Papers were strewn everywhere, desks overturned, and in the center of it all stood Carolyn, wild-eyed and wielding a stapler like a weapon. "You!" she shrieked when she saw us. "How dare you show your face here?" Security guards were trying to restrain her, but she fought like a woman possessed. Martin stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Carolyn, stop. This isn't going to change anything." She laughed, a high, unhinged sound that sent chills down my spine. "Change? I'll show you change." Before anyone could react, she hurled the stapler. It missed Martin by inches. shattering the glass wall behind us. In the ensuing commotion, I found myself face to face with Carolyn. Her eyes, once filled with hatred, now held something far more terrifying: emptiness. "He was supposed to be mine," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why wasn't I enough?" For a moment, I saw past the monster she'd become to the broken woman beneath. "I'm sorry," I said softly, "but he was never yours to have." Security finally managed to subdue her, leading her away in handcuffs. As the elevator doors closed on her tear-streaked face, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Martin emerged from his boss's office, looking shell-shocked. "It's done," he said. "I've resigned." I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Let's go home." As we drove away from the building that had been the source of so much pain, I realized we were at a crossroads. Our life as we knew it was over. The future stretched before us, uncertain and terrifying. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Martin glanced at me, a small smile playing at his lips. "Now, we start over. Together." I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. We had weathered the storm, but the aftermath would test us in ways we couldn't imagine. As we pulled into our driveway, I saw Gloria waiting on the porch, her face etched with concern. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever came next. "Ready?" Martin asked, his hand on the door handle. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in weeks. Despite everything, I saw the man I fell in love with all those years ago. "Ready," I replied, stepping out to face our new reality. Little did I know, the greatest challenge of our lives was yet to come. 2 months after Martin quit his job, life had settled into a new rhythm. We were healing, slowly but surely. That morning, as we walked hand in hand through the park, I felt a glimmer of the happiness we once shared. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A child's scream pierced the air. We turned to see a little girl chasing her ball into the street, a truck barreling towards her. Before I could react, Martin was running. Time slowed. I saw Martin reach the child, pushing her to safety. I saw the truck driver's horrified face. I saw Martin turn, his eyes meeting mine one last time. The impact was deafening. The days that followed were a blur of grief and disbelief. Gloria moved in, her own sorrow mingling with mine as we tried to navigate this new Martin-less world. It was Gloria who first noticed Carolyn's social media posts. "Elaine," she said softly one evening, holding out her phone, "you need to see this." I looked at the screen, my heart clenching. There, in stark black and white, was a post from Carolyn. "Missing my soulmate. Can't wait for our next secret rendezvous, my love. True love waits." Anger, hot and fierce, surged through me. How dare she? Even now, after everything, she was still living in her delusional world. "We have to stop this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Gloria nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "Together." The next day, we drove to Carolyn's apartment. With each mile, I felt my resolve strengthen. This ended today. Carolyn answered the door, her eyes widening in surprise. "Elaine? Gloria? What are you?" "We need to talk," I interrupted, pushing past her into the apartment. Carolyn's living room was a shrine to her obsession. Photos of Martin covered every surface, many clearly taken without his knowledge. "What is this?" Gloria gasped, horror evident in her voice. Carolyn's face flushed. "You don't understand. Martin and I—" "Martin is dead," I said, the words like shards of glass in my throat. Carolyn stumbled back as if struck. "No, you're lying. He can't be." "He died saving a child's life," Gloria added, her voice thick with emotion. 2 months ago." Carolyn shook her head violently. "No, we just talked last week. He said—" "Enough," I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of it. "This delusion ends now, Carolyn. Martin never loved you. He never will. He's gone, and all you're left with are lies and stolen moments that meant nothing to him." Tears streamed down Carolyn's face as the truth finally seemed to penetrate. She collapsed onto the couch, her body racked with sobs. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity. Then I remembered all the pain she'd caused, all the damage she'd done. "We're leaving now," I said, my voice cold. "If I see one more post, one more word about your imaginary relationship with my husband, I will not hesitate to take legal action. Do you understand?" Carolyn nodded weakly, not meeting my eyes. As Gloria and I walked out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was truly over. Back home, Gloria pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Martin would be too." I closed my eyes, letting the tears fall freely. For the first time since Martin's death, I felt a sense of peace. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the loss, but also the love, the strength, the resilience. I reached for the photo on my nightstand, Martin and me on our wedding day, young and full of hope. "I miss you," I whispered, tracing his face with my finger. "But I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay." As I drifted off to sleep, I felt Martin's presence, warm and comforting. In my dreams, he smiled at me, proud and loving as always. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new sorrows, but I was ready to face them all, because now I knew the truth that had always been there, hidden beneath my insecurities and doubts. I was strong, I was worthy, and I was loved. The end.